They're on.
So today I'm going to be talking about American women astronauts. And I'm sure everybody remembers this, with William Shatner as James Tiberius Kirk, intoning as the photograph came on, or not photograph, the model came on actually. Space, the final frontier, these are the voyages of the USS Enterprise, etc. And I would say that basically space is not the final frontier for NASA.
Escape or something.
Sorry. Women in space is the final frontier. And NASA has finally gotten around to engaging in that final frontier. In terms of data about women astronauts, there's been a total of about 634, as of the last count I had, of individuals in space. 73 have been women out of the 634, so you're talking about 10% or so. And 56 of those were from the United States. The lag time between the first astronauts and first women astronauts, for Russia it was 2 years, for China 8 years, for the United States 22 years. Now you ask yourself, why is that? Initially, the US was concerned about women in space. They were worried about the, quote, physical and emotional stresses of being in space. And they were also worried about changes in the social order. That is, women were supposed to stay home, have the kids, watch the kids, make the meals, keep the house, and be the nice wife. That's what NASA imagined as women's duties were back in the very early 60s. And then, all through the early shuttle years, all of the astronauts who were piloting the shuttle were test pilots. And initially there were no women test pilots because all test pilots were former military fighter pilots. And all military fighter pilots were men because military excluded women from active combat and from flight, basically.
So
Yep.
once in the military, it was excluded, and there was a federal law that prevented it.
Okay, federal law prohibited it. So, but women were not able to participate. Yeah.
The women that went up in Russia and China, their credentials.
I'll get to that in a minute. At least for the first Russian. So these were the Mercury 7 astronauts. They were the first U.S. astronauts. They're all men, all crew cuts, all ex-military. Everybody knows about them. And they were all white. And if you look at the plaque that Apollo 11 had on the moon, here men from the planet Earth were set for the moon, the payment piece for all mankind. This was sort of and I don't think NASA purposely meant this way, but it just was the thinking of the time. It wasn't purposeful, it wasn't meant to be this way, it just was the thinking of the time. Now there was something called the Mercury 13 program. Initially it was called Women in Space Program, but later renamed by the media in the 1990s after the fact. It was established by William Randolph Lovelace II, who was a flight surgeon who advised NASA on testing for astronauts. So what testing should candidates go through? Initially, there were over 700 candidates who reviewed. All were very established pilots. There were 19 women who went through the same exact tests as the male astronauts did. Both physical tests as well as psychological tests. And and they came up with 13 women who they felt were qualified. Unfortunately, before the program was completed, it was canceled by both NASA and the Navy. But women finally were selected by NASA in January 16th of '78. This was NASA Group 8, and there were 6 women of the 35 astronauts who were chosen. Who were women. So the first woman in space was her. She was Valentina Tereshkova, who was Russian. She was actually selected when she was a textile worker, but she was an experienced skydiver. And this is what the USSR needed at that time, because the way they had their initial flights in Bashka was the spacecraft would be launched on a booster, would go into orbit, would re-enter, and then the cosmonaut at about 20,000 feet, I think it was.
23,000? 23,000?
3,000?
23,000?
23,000, right. 23,000 feet would exit the capsule and parachute back to Earth. And she was, as I said, an experienced skydiver, so they knew that basically they could count on her to do this successfully. And in fact, she did. She launched on Vostok 6 on June 16th of '63, had 48 orbits of Earth for almost 3 days, and to this day is the only woman who had a solo space mission. All the other women were in either with men or 2 women. So let's talk about the American women astronauts. And the first is Sally Ride. Everybody knows Sally. She was born and raised in Los Angeles, graduated Stanford in 1973. She had a Bachelor's of Science in Physics, as well as a Bachelor of Arts in English. So she was double majored. Went on to get a Master's at Stanford in Physics in '75, and completed her PhD at Stanford in Physics in 1978. And her PhD thesis was on the interactions of X-rays with the interstellar medium. NASA was interested. She was interested. She saw an article in a journal that requested, and she requested an application from NASA. Completed it in 1977, and was one of 8,079 applicants that year. Not all women, of course, but there were over 8,000 applicants. And it was narrowed to 250 applicants. And then NASA selected their Group 8 on January 16th of 1978. And as I said, she was one of the 6 women in the group of 35 astronaut candidates. Unfortunately, as they were going, so once you became an astronaut, there was a time period of at least 2 to 3 years of training. Included flight training, and included physics, flight, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Through all of this, the women experienced sexist attitudes at some point in time. Yeah.
Sally Ride came up with an interesting quote. They asked her when did she realize she was accepted as an astronaut, and she said, "When Rob Britton quit holding doors for me."
Yeah. That was the least of it. That at least was, courtesy.
Yeah.
I mean, I hold doors for both men and women. But There were attitudes like the women shouldn't be here, unfortunately. Eventually, NASA and the astronauts got over this. So she completed training on August 31st of 79. She then went on to do, after you completed training, so the training you can see was about a year of training, quote unquote. Then you went on to do parts of missions for NASA, but still had not gone up into space. So she assisted in the development of the Shuttle remote manipulator system, otherwise known as the Canadarm, that arm that picks up stuff. And then she was Capcom, capsule, the old term is capsule communication, because the fact that Mercury was called a capsule. And so they continued that designation, Capcom, where an astronaut was the person who communicated, an astronaut who usually had not gone into space yet, communicated with the astronauts on board the spacecraft, because they would have a lot in common. So she was Capcom for the Shuttle number 2 in November of 81 and Shuttle number 3 in March of 82. This is her backseat training in the T-38. All astronauts, no matter who they were, had training in flight. Because if ever there was an emergency, somebody might, who was not otherwise usually the pilot, might have to fly the shuttle. The first women astronauts were all mission specialists. They were not pilots to begin with. So they were doing various types of missions, and you'll see that in a minute. But none of them were actual pilots yet. So they had pilot training. And initially they were in the backseat of the T-38 and stayed in the backseat usually, but the backseat had controls, and most of the pilots gave the women stick time, including even taking off and landing. This is the Canadarm that's coming out of the shuttle, and you see it was used to deploy various packages, sometimes that were a science package, sometimes actually deploy either capture and bring in a satellite for repair, or deploy a satellite. So Sally had 2 flights. She was on STS-7 on the Challenger, which launched in June 18th of 83. Was the first American woman in space. And was responsible for the use of the Canadarm as a mission specialist. Excuse me. So they deployed a package that was exploring metallic alloys in microgravity. That was in STS-41G, again in Challenger, which launched on October 5th of 84. She had responsibility as the engineer for that mission. And then after that mission, she retired from NASA, and I guess most of you know, was appointed professor of physics at UCSD on July 1st of 89, and continued as professor of medicine until her unfortunately untimely death.
She also started an organization that promoted women in non-sciences.
Right.
That's still in effect.
Right. So this was a shuttle launch. This is Sally in orbit on board the shuttle. I don't know which flight it was. And this is her as professor of physics at UCSD. The next woman is Kathy Sullivan. She was born in Paterson, New Jersey, moved to the San Fernando Valley in '58. Graduated USC in '73 with a Bachelor of Science in Earth Sciences, and then got her PhD in geology from Dalhousie University, as well as Bedford Institute of Oceanography in '78. And her thesis was on the structure and evolution of the Newfoundland Basin. Her brother, who was an aerospace engineer, told her that NASA was interested in recruiting women. He found out about it. So she applied in '77 with the other 8,000 applicants. And she was also accepted to NASA Group 8 on January 16th of '78, along with Sally Wright and 4 other women candidates, some of whom we'll talk about in a minute. And she completed her training also on August 31st of '79. So her job was basically, her first job after completing training was to help develop the systems management checklist for the first shuttle flights. And then she was assigned to NASA's high altitude research project at Ellington Air Force Base. And she was concerned about that. She felt NASA was just putting her in her backwater type of appointment where she would never get to fly on the shuttle. So she was concerned about it. She ended up being the first woman to wear the U.S. Air Force pressure suit and set the unofficial high altitude record for women at 63,000 feet.
How? How? How did she get up that high?
Yeah, what?
She she was backseat. I don't know what.
Some Zoom climb in a fighter of some sort. A Zoom climb of some sort in a fighter.
Yeah, it was a Zoom climb.
Yeah.
I think it was 105.
T-38 or F4 would do it. Either one.
I'm not sure.
So that go in.
But she was backseat, and so set the unofficial record for women in altitude. And this is her in I don't know if anybody can identify the jet from the looking of it. It's not a T-38.
It's a U-2. It's a U-2.
B-57.
Yeah, it's a long-wing B-57.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, that may be, not what she used to do the altitude record, but that was her in her pressure suit. She went on to do 3 shuttle flights on STS-41G. So she more than overcame her fear about not getting into space. She was on STS-41G on Challenger on October 5th of '84. She was the mission specialist, deployed satellites and conducted various experiments on board. And a lot of her experiments were geologic experiments, looking at different geologic stuff from space. STS-31 launched on April 24th of '90 on Discovery. Again, as mission specialist, she deployed the Hubble Space Telescope.
Push the button.
And she
pushed the button.
She pushed a button. But she was the first woman to perform an EVA, an extravehicular activity. And then on STS-45, which also launched on Discovery on March 24th of '92, she was actually the payload commander and deployed a number of different satellites, and then left NASA in '93. So this is Kathy Sullivan with Sally Wright here on STS-41G. And that's the Hubble Space Telescope from STS-41G. And this is her signature on a photograph of her doing her EVA. Judy Resnick was born and raised in Akron, Ohio. She was valedictorian in high school. and had a perfect SAT. She had an SAT of 1600. Anybody here get an SAT of 1600? I don't even know of anybody who got it. Do you know somebody? I never. I know of no one from my high school who had a perfect SAT. Even the valedictorian did not have a perfect SAT. So, I mean, it's like, when I saw that, I was like, this is insane. She graduated Carnegie Institute of Technology in 1970 by the way, and finished high school at age 16. Finished college at 20. Worked for RCA in Morristown, New Jersey on various missile and radar projects. And then went on for a while, and then went on to the University of Maryland, where she got her PhD in electrical engineering in 1977. Please keep this year in mind, because this is an insanely busy year for Judy Resnick. Her old boyfriend, who was a pilot, heard about NASA recruitment of women. So Resnick became interested. She obtained her private pilot license, what year? 1977, while doing her PhD, with near perfect scores on her license exams. She went and talked with Michael Collins and John Glenn about going into space, and like, was this something she should do? Became convinced. Applied to NASA in 1977 while getting her pilot's license, whilst completing her PhD, and was selected on January 16th of '78 as one of the 6 women in Group A. So she completed astronaut training also on August 31st of '79, and then worked on orbital systems, flight systems, and manual control of spaceflight. So on a number of different things for NASA during her years, couple of years as a astronaut, but not in space. She also developed software for control of this shuttle, it's a space shuttle manipulator system, the Canada. So she's working on orbital systems, she's doing flight systems, manual control of spaceflight, and working on the Canada all at the same time. She then was assigned to STS-41B, which was the maiden flight of Discovery, launched on August 30th of '84, and her duties were to operate the robotic arm to release 3 communication satellites, which she did. Now it's interesting because this mission, while they were launching, the pilot and commander noted that insulation had come off the large external tank, and that they later had problems with the solid rocket boosters. This is Judy Resnick in orbit. Her second space flight was STS-51L Challenger, and with her was a teacher named Krista McAuliffe. She was nominated from the Teacher in Space program. This was established in '84 by President Reagan. Krista McAuliffe applied. There were 11,000 teachers who applied that year. There were 114 semifinalists who were nominated by state panels. And on July 1st of '85, McAuliffe was announced as one of 10 finalists. And on January 19th of '85, she was chosen as the Teacher in Space and began training. Now the training, remember, she's a teacher. She has nothing else, primarily. She was a science teacher, I think, so she had some science background, but really not a lot. This is her pilot training. Okay. And she, like everybody else, had to train in the back seat of the T-38 and learn how to fly. And this was her weightless training, like everybody else. She was on the Vomit Comet and learned how to handle weightlessness. STS-51L was delayed several times due to weather. Finally launching on 28th of '86. And the entire nation tuned in since there was a teacher on board. There were TVs set up in school classrooms to see this because there was a teacher going into space. And what they saw was that. Unfortunately. NASA had a board of inquiry found that both NASA and Thiokol, who developed the solid rocket boosters, were at fault. Because Thiokol knew that there were problems, but never informed NASA until the day before. But the day before, they didn't warn NASA not to fly, because the rubber was brittle and might not keep the gases intact. NASA ignored it and launched anyway. So both NASA and Thiokol were cited as problems, and they went around fixing those problems. Mae Carol Jameson was born and raised in Decatur, Alabama. So she knew from an early age she wanted to go to space because she was inspired by Nicole Nichols of Star Trek, who was Uhura, the communication specialist, if no one remembers that. She entered Stanford at the age 16. Got her Bachelor's of Science in Chemical Engineering and a Bachelor of Arts in African and Afro-American Studies in 1977. Went on to get her MD degree from Cornell School of Medicine in '81, and then did her, it was actually internship at USC Los Angeles Medical Center. So after her internship, she went into Peace Corps and then went into private practice in Los Angeles. But while she was doing this, while she was in private practice, which is a busy practice, obviously, she was taking graduate level engineering courses. Applied to NASA in '87. Excuse me, and was chosen for Group 12. So was one of 15 applicants accepted for Group 12. Her technical duties after completing training was to work with Shuttle software, since she had engineering courses. And then she also was involved in launch support activities at Kennedy Space Center. That was one of the two things you could be appointed to, besides doing your other duties like working with shuttle software. It was either Capcom and support activities at Kennedy Space Center. Her only mission was STS-47. She launched in September 12th of '92 on Endeavour and was the first black woman in space. And she carried the Space Lab Japan module into space on that flight, and so conducted medical research while on board the module. That was her job.
What's the Japan module? What is that? What is the Japan module?
It was a lab, basically, a medical lab. So this is her on board the shuttle in the module. This is her in the front, in front of the shuttle. And this is her doing experiments in the Japan lab module. And after her shuttle flight, she left NASA to go on into doing other things, including volunteer work and stuff like that. Ellen Laurie Ochoa born in Los Angeles, raised here in La Mesa, graduated Grossmont High in '75, got her bachelor in physics and was Phi Beta Kappa at SDSU in 1980. Then went to Stanford University to get a master's in electrical engineering in '81 and a PhD in electrical engineering in '85. And then after that went to work at NASA Ames Research Center on optical systems. She saw again the application, sent in her application to NASA '87, was selected by NASA in 1990, and trained and became an astronaut in July of '91. Her technical duties included crew representative for software, hardware, and robotics, and was lead Capcom at that point in time. And then she was deputy chief of the astronaut office, all during her time of getting ready to go into space. This is her in flight training, and like everybody else at backseat in T-38. She had 4 shuttle flights, STS-56 on April 8th of '93 on Discovery. She was mission specialist, the first Hispanic woman in space, and conducted solar experiments. In STS-66, November 3rd of '94 on Atlantis, was payload commander, and conducted solar experiments and engaged in satellite deployment. STS-96, May 27th of '99 on Discovery. She was the flight engineer on the first space shuttle to dock at the ISS after it had been partially completed, and put up the space hab module, so one of the modules, and then engaged in satellite deployment. And then finally STS-110 on April 8th of '02 on Atlantis, she was flight engineer and added structural elements to the ISS. And now NASA was engaged mostly in putting the ISS together. That was what most of the shuttle flights were dedicated to. She was a very experienced flautist, playing the flute, played semi-professionally, and so brought her flute on board. This is her on the ISS, or in the space shuttle and on the ISS. And this is the space hab module that they put in. She had some interesting NASA duties after she completed her space flights. From 2007 to 12, she was deputy director at Johnson Space Center. On January 1st, 2013, she was the first Hispanic named as director of Johnson Space Center. So she was in charge from 2013, I forget how many years, for all-manned spaceflight.
Did you say manned spaceflight?
Yeah. Well,
Oops.
that's what they still call it. That's what they still call it. That's what they still call it. Crewed spaceflight. They now have.
We might have to report you to HR.
I should take notes, right?
So no, that's what NASA termed it still. Eileen Mary Collins was born and raised in Elmira, New York. She went to Syracuse University, a BA in Math and Economics, and then went on to Stanford U to get an MS in Operations Research, and then her MA in Space Systems Management at Webster University, and joined the U.S. Air Force as the first woman pilot instructor of the T-38, and the first U.S. Air Force test pilot school graduate in 1990. So now you finally have somebody who is a high profile, high-performance jet aircraft pilot and a test pilot. And she applies to NASA in '89, and along with 2,500 others, is selected on January 17th of '90 to NASA Group 13. There were 23 astronauts in the group, all trained very quickly, in 9 months. Her technical duties were orbiter systems, particularly the APUs on board the shuttle. She was astronaut support person at Kennedy Space Center and Capcom. And guess what she went on to do? STS-63 launched on February 3rd of '95 on Discovery. She was the first woman shuttle pilot. And they rendezvoused with the Russian space station Mir. In STS-84, which launched in May of '97 on Atlantis, she was pilot again docking with Mir. STS-93, which launched in July of '99 on Columbia, was the first woman space shuttle commander. And they deployed the Chandra X-ray Observatory. And then finally on STS-114, which launched in July of '05 on Discovery, she again was commander for a resupply of the International Space Station. So you have the first woman who now is pilot and then commander of the space shuttle.
Are the pilot and the commander the same thing?
No. Pilot is, basically you can think of the pilot as the co-pilot and the commander as the captain. Okay? They're equivalent. So the commander is the commander of the entire mission.
Okay.
But is also in charge of the space shuttle. The pilot is sort of the pilot of the space shuttle, but basically the co-pilot. So this is her among her crew, which was the first woman to pilot the space shuttle. And this is her on board either the ISS or the space shuttle. I'm not sure which. This is her training on board the space shuttle. You notice she's in the left-hand seat. So she is commander at that point. Peggy Annette Whitson, born and raised in Iowa, went to Iowa Wesleyan College with a BS in biology and chemistry in '81. Went on to Rice with a PhD in biochemistry in '86. Was adjunct professor of medicine at University of Texas, as well as Rice. And then selected by NASA in '96 and completed training in '98. On expedition, now NASA now terms their flights as expedition rather than space shuttle, because oftentimes they're not launching on the space shuttle. And their main thing is they're doing an expedition on the ISS, usually for 6 months. So they docked with the ISS in June of '02 on Expedition 5. She did EVAs and conducted medical and science experiments on board the ISS. Expedition 16, again docked with the ISS in October of '07 with multiple EVAs. Expedition 50/51/52. It's so named because of different teams, partial teams coming on board. So it changes depending on who's on board. So she docked in November of '16, was commander of ISS, was the oldest woman to fly in space. The record for the most days in space of all U.S. astronauts up to that time, men or women, at 665 days.
Yeah.
I just saw that a Russian has 1,100 days in space.
Yeah. She now has 675 days in space. She went up as a passenger. for 10
Right.
days.
Yeah.
What did he say? What did he say? I couldn't hear what he said.
She now has what?
675 days in space.
675 days because she went up as a passenger on one of the other paid for flights. And she has the record of most EVAs by a woman astronaut. 10 EVAs, more than 10 hours total time as in EVA. And then Axiom Mission 2, she was on board the Dragon spacecraft and was commander of the Dragon spacecraft, which docked with the ISS in May of 23. So this is her on board the ISS. And this is one of her many EVAs. Christina Hammock-Kopp was born in Michigan, raised in Jacksonville, North Carolina, went to North Carolina State University with a BS in electrical engineering and physics in 2001, and her MS in electrical engineering in 2002, and then went to NASA Academy, Goddard Space Flight, graduating in 2001. She was selected as an astronaut candidate in 2013, completed training in 2015, was on board Expedition 59/60/61, arrived at the ISS on March 14th of 19, left on February 6th of 20, and so was the longest stay in space by women up to that time, with 328 days. In October 18th of 19, she was one of two of the first all-woman EVAs. The purpose was to install new lithium-ion batteries on board the ISS, and she was joined by Jessica Meir, who we'll talk about in a minute. And then they did two more all-women EVAs in January of 2020. So this is her on board the ISS. Jessica Meir. Did everybody meet Jessica Meir? Was it last year's inductions
Yeah,
ceremony?
Gala.
Last year's gala?
Yeah.
Right. Anybody meet her? Really cool person. Yeah, I met her. Really cool person. Born and raised in Caribou, Maine. Went to Brown as a BS in biology. Was magna cum laude in '99. International Space University at Strasbourg, France, with an MS in space studies, and then completed her PhD in marine biology in 2009 at Scripps Oceanographic Institute. I'm particularly interested in this because I was contemplating doing that myself. I was a bio major. My chairman of medicine, or chairman of biology, was a marine biologist and tried to influence me to do that, but went a different route. She was selected by NASA in June 2013 in Group 21, completed training in 2015, went on to the ISS Expedition 61/62, arriving in September of 19. So she was the person who joined Christina Kopp in EVA on October 18th of 19. And this is her training in the water pool at Houston. And this is her shining face and the all-women EVA.
Neil,
Yeah,
what does EVA stand for?
extravehicular activity, spacewalk. Sorry,
No.
it's extravehicular activity. It means going outside the spacecraft, so basically a spacewalk.
Got it. Okay.
Sorry. So Christina has been named for the Artemis 2 team, which will perform a circumlunar flight, and that is to go 6,000 miles beyond the lunar surface and return. It's a 10-day mission. And it's now scheduled for, I forget either end of 25 or beginning of 26. And she'll be mission specialist. Jessica Meir has not been officially named for anything yet, but NASA has big plans for her. And the plans are either or Artemis 3, which will be the return to the lunar moon, to the lunar surface, right? And that'll be at the South Pole. And that's scheduled now for, I think, 27 or 28. And maybe first boots on Mars. No one knows. But, I mean, that's NASA's kind of conception. So what are the characteristics of women astronauts? They're all extremely intelligent. Most with advanced degrees or extensive pilot training. And usually, if they get a degree in one area, they'll do graduate studies in another area, just because they're interested. Highly motivated. Most with extra courses, again, pilot license when they didn't need to, multiple space flights, and or advanced NASA administration or other companies or non-profits after leaving flight. All were very capable. All handled piloting and their research skills with positive results. NASA got positive results for every single one who went out into space. And I'll take questions. Yeah.
Dare we mention that most of them are beautiful?
Yeah, if you take a look, yes.
Yeah, what's up with that anyway?
But I don't know if that was one of the criteria. Yeah.
The PR. I was always wondering how many of them were married. You never hear about husbands.
A number of them were. I know, for example, Catherine Sullivan was married. I don't know about some of the others. Yeah.
Well, I think one of them went up with their husband on the space station.
Maybe.
One of the expeditions that was a husband.
Yeah, more recently, yes. And I didn't talk about it. Obviously, I did not talk about all 56 of the women who were in space. I mean, that would be too much. I'd be here for hours and hours. But yeah, I think you're right. I think one did go with her husband. But I don't know the number that were married.
I just think of the dedication of the husband to support the wife and never like that, what they have to
I
go
was
through.
dating for 10 years with the baby.
Well, think about it that way, and now think about the wife of the husband who goes into space, and it's the same kind of dedication. Yeah.
You briefly mentioned that there was Dr. Hollowell, or whatever his name was, that had 19 women that he thought were qualified.
Right.
The one thing, I think there's a few books about it. We thought we were going to space or something like that. And then, but it came down, they didn't have one thing though. They didn't have experience in high performance aircraft.
Right. Well, that's true.
And so
They were all experienced pilots.
But early on,
But
if you're going to hire somebody, wouldn't you want to hire somebody that's really a test pilot to fly something like this stuff instead of somebody that's got 400 hours in a Cessna 172?
which is what NASA used as their decision not to have them fly. But they couldn't be in advanced aircraft because of the law.
Do you know the percentage? I mean, when people are hired to fly the space shuttle or whatever, some of them, the earlier ones, were qualified pilots. In fact, they all were that piloted the darn thing. How many percentage of the earlier astronauts were pilots, military pilots?
Are you talking about the first?
The
Well,
shuttle.
all were test pilots.
Okay.
All were test pilots.
Okay.
There was a requirement.
All were military pilots and then test pilots. That was a requirement until you get to Eileen Collins.
Well, now I guess there's how many people are actually flying these are qualified to fly these things now. It wouldn't seem like be that many of them. 'cause
Well, the
there's not
shuttle,
many.
remember, is not flying anymore. So the only thing that's going up is Soyuz or Dragon, which does not require the same skill as flying the shuttle.
Why haven't they brought those people back on the Soyuz?
That's a good question, I don't know.
You know, one of the books I read stated that there was actually, the Air Force didn't really want women in the program, so they added the qualification that you had to be a military test pilot just to exclude women, because at the time, it was illegal for women to serve that way.
Yeah.
I think that law wasn't repealed from '96.
I think one of those early pilots was Betty Skelton, who flew the little Stinker biplane down there.
I'm sorry?
I think one of the early women selected for that first woman astronaut program was Betty Skelton.
Oh, there were, yeah, I
Who flew
mean,
that little
Jackie Cobb,
Cobb
Cobb was,
Stinker biplane.
right, Cobb was one of them, Skeleton, I forget who else. If you ever see, if you ever look on, if you have Apple Plus at home, you can look at for this program called For All Mankind. And one of the women who's involved early on in that fictional thing of what if the Russians beat us to the moon was based on Jackie Cobb.
One of those women, the one in the Mercury 13, actually went up on a Blue Origin module.
Yes, yes. It might have been Cobb, actually. Yeah.
Can you speak to the difference? Oh, I'm sorry.
I have a question. We have a couple astronauts stuck in space.
Yes.
What's the status of all that? How
They've
did that
been-
happen, and what are they doing about it?
It happened because of problems with quality control at Boeing. Okay, so some of the thrusters were malfunctioning.
Is this on the ISS?
No, on the Starliner, the capsule that brought them up to the ISS, and they can't bring them back on that capsule because it's malfunctioning. So it's sort of like, but they don't want to release it because, and it's docked to the ISS. They don't want to release it because they want to see what's wrong with it. So they're trying to figure out what to do.
Isn't that kind of a disgrace that we don't have a way to get those people out of there?
Well, we have a way to get them out. I mean, we could fly. We could fly either a Soyuz or a Dragon capsule, which are functioning very well, up to the ISS. But they don't want to do that because they want to try and figure out what's wrong with the Starliner first. And so they're staying. I mean, they're happy staying on board. Yeah.
You mentioned about the essential habits having a lot of concurrence and not coming up on the X-15 program. And we also get to say that Neil Armstrong was on land with X-15 since it landed at such a steep angle and the skids underneath it.
Right.
My other question is, a lot of these missions that we have on the shuttle are classified.
Yes. Well, not a lot. Some of them were. Yes.
That's a general statement. But for those that did, was there any separation of?
Well, that's a really good question.
Repeat the question, please.
And I don't know how to answer that. So the question is, basically the shuttle released a lot of satellites, etc., that were all classified. There were a lot of classified missions. And the question is, was there a separation between who was doing it, men or women, when they were doing those classified missions? I think not, because I think I remember one of the women talking about the fact that it was classified and she could not talk about it. So I don't think there was separation.
Is there a difference in physio?
Neil, you had mentioned that Ellen Choller graduated from Rosemont High School.
Right.
An interesting fact is 5 astronauts have gone to Rosemont High School. They have not all graduated from there. An example is Bill Anders went there for a little while. But there are a total of 5 that went to Rosemont High School.
And she's one of them.
Yeah. Little fact. Probably couldn't find 5 at high school in Houston or something like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Which one of them died in Colombia?
Which one of them died in Colombia?
I don't recall. When in Columbia that burned up?
Yeah, yes. And it was the Indian woman, I can't remember her name. And then one other, and I don't remember which.
Do you know if, with like the physical exam that they had to go through for training, were they the same expectations for women and men? Or did they-
Absolutely.
So they were the same?
Yes,
Because
absolutely.
you know, like in high school, the PE standards are different for women
Right,
and men?
nope, same.
Wow.
You gotta do the same thing as the men.
But
And
we have to carry the same weight, run in the same.
whatever the men's expectations were, that's what the women's expectations were.
So it's like extra hard then, right, for women?
It's not, you know, I mean, it's not so much carrying weight, it's mostly, you know, can you exert yourself, can you sustain the G's that you're gonna sustain? Are there any health problems that you have and so on?
But I mean the physical training.
Right, physical training is the same. Anybody else? No? Yeah.
I think I read one time that the first Mars mission might be all women. So there must be some physiological difference between men and women, or women are better at flying in space.
I haven't read that. I know that NASA is thinking about having a woman be the first person to step on Mars.
That's what I meant.
For you know, to recognize the benefits of, you know,
PR.
well, PR and to say, you know, sort of women are, you know, can do this just like men can. But I hadn't heard that they were thinking of an all-woman equivalent.
Well, there's a vision problem. Apparently women adapt better, their vision recovers quicker.
Everybody's vision changes in weightlessness because your eyeball rounds. I don't know that women do any differently than that.
Good stuff.
Thanks, Neil.
Good stuff, Nick.